had been invited under the tent by a friend.
Yes.
He had been invited. One last thing, I know we're playing the music, but Austin Metcalf's the victim, the deceased. His father went on a podcast and listened to it for yourself, but he called Carmelo Anthony a racial slur.
Stop the scroll. National television just broadcasts one of the most insane courtroom accusations you will ever hear. They just accused a grieving father of something unimaginable. Watch this. Wait, did you catch that? They are on national television dropping an absolute bombshell about the victim's grieving father. Think about the magnitude of what they just broadcast to millions of viewers. They are directly accusing a man whose son was just killed of going on a podcast and delivering highly specific racial stereotypes about baby mamas and government assistants. You have to realize that when you have a massive platform like this, making claims like that completely shifts the public narrative away from the tragedy of the actual crime and turns it into a chaotic racial debate. Whether or not it's true, look at the absolute conviction in her delivery. She's reading it off her notes as if it's the ultimate trump card to invalidate the entire trial. It's a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Instead of looking at the facts of a devastating stabbing, the audience is suddenly redirected to judge the moral character of the victim's dad. This is exactly how high-profile cases get completely derailed in the court of public opinion.
He was sentenced to 35 years in prison, which he's appealing. The case has a lot of people divided. Some people believe that race was a factor in the trial because there were no black jurors. They were all the three black jurors that were there were educators, and they were released.
They were struck.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have a jury of your peers, and you're not supposed to just strike someone because they're black. And in this case, they gave the reasoning that they're educators, and this happened, these were high school students, and this happened at a school track meet, so they couldn't be impartial because of that.
All right, pause and listen to this argument about the jury selection. This is where the misinformation really starts to take root. They are claiming that 3 black jurors were struck from the case simply because they were black, and that the educator excuse was just a cover-up. But here is the critical detail that they conveniently leave out of the broadcast. They don't mention that some of the jurors actually admitted during selection that they couldn't be impartial because they didn't want to send another young black man to prison. If a juror openly admits they have a bias, the prosecution is legally obligated to strike them. It has nothing to do with systemic racism in that specific moment. It has everything to do with following the rules of a fair trial. But watch how the panel frames it. They present it as a blatant civil rights violation to outrage the audience. It's incredibly dangerous to selectively omit court transcripts just to fit a preconceived television narrative.
The victim here had his twin brother with him, who was also a very large person. If you don't fear for your life, if you weigh 130 pounds, I weigh 130 pounds. Facing somebody that's 200 pounds, I would be terrified of that. So I don't understand why self-defense was rejected by this jury.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, especially the jury representation. That's what stood out to me. And we know there's plenty of evidence that there's sentencing disparity with people of color. The one thing to me, though, is what is the fair sentence when you take a life? And this is what I'm struggling with, because this is a tragedy across the board. A 17-year-old is dead. A 17-year-old is going to likely spend 35 years in jail. He could appeal at 17.
This part is actually fascinating because you can see the panel struggling with the reality of the sentence. They are debating whether 35 years is an appropriate punishment for taking a life when you're only 17 years old. Notice how they try to minimize the severity of the crime by hyper-focusing on the defendant's age. He's going to spend 35 years in jail. What they aren't telling their millions of viewers is how the parole system actually works. In many of these cases, with good behavior, a 35-year sentence doesn't actually mean 35 years behind bars. They could be eligible for parole in half that time. But that doesn't sound as shocking or as devastating on daytime television. It is all about maximizing the emotional impact of the segment. They paint a picture of a kid whose entire life is over, totally bypassing the fact that another 17-year-old actually lost his life permanently. It's selective empathy, broadcast at the highest level.
Than he is. He was the only black kid under the tent, and he...
Did you hear that incredibly brief, almost throwaway line? She claims he was the only black kid under the tent. That is factually 100% false. It's not even a gray area. During the trial, the main defense witness, who was in the tent with him, was also Black. But on a show like this, facts can be rewritten in real time. Millions of people just absorbed that false statement as absolute truth, and they will go to work tomorrow repeating it. This is how easily the public record gets distorted. The producers clearly failed to fact-check the basic transcripts, or they just didn't care because the lie fits the narrative much better than the truth. It makes the defendant look isolated, targeted, and alone. It's narrative engineering at its absolute finest.
Especially when that particular area is made up of 10% of an African-American community. So I don't think he got a jury of his peers. So I think on appeal, there is a legitimate thing, a legitimate reason.
Check out the absolute confidence when she declares there's a legitimate reason for an appeal. She is literally acting as an armchair appellate judge for millions of viewers. In the legal world, an appeal requires actual proof that evidence was withheld, or the judge made a gross error in procedure. You can't just appeal a murder conviction because you don't like the racial makeup of the jury, especially when those jurors were dismissed for admitting actual bias. But to the average viewer at home, her confidence makes it sound like a mistrial is a guaranteed slam dunk. They are essentially giving false hope and stirring up public outrage over a legal process they clearly haven't fully researched. It's highly irresponsible, but it sure makes for great daytime TV. The media will spin everything. Hit subscribe if you want the actual facts behind the headlines, and I'll see you in the next breakdown.